Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Entrepreneur Encounters. I really enjoyed today's interview. I talked with Angela Quigley, the co-owner of Married in Milwaukee. It's a wedding blog and venue connector. I can't help but laugh when I first heard the story of how she got her business started. Listen in.
So that's actually somewhat of a funny story. I would say I was not necessarily entrepreneurial minded before starting Married in Milwaukee. My husband has always been entrepreneurial minded. He comes from a family of entrepreneurs that have owned things like bars and restaurants, gaming equipment sales, all kinds of different things. So he's always had that bug. And I tell the story of when I was pregnant with our son, who is now 11. My husband was talking to him inside of my belly, and we would say, "Hey, baby Quigley, I really want to start a business that I can leave to you. And, I can't wait to like do stuff like that." And I remember in my head sort of being like, "Oh, why can't you just have a stable corporate job and just be happy with that?" And I didn't say that out loud, but I kind of had that thought in my head. So then when the actual thought of starting Married in Milwaukee as a blog became more of a side hobby for myself. I never really imagined it could turn into our full time gig that we now both work full time at. And that's been making our living and paying our mortgage and paying our taxes and all that good stuff for, close to 10 years now. So I say like I'm definitely a convert. I can't go back to corporate, I don't think. But gosh, I'm so grateful for now owning my own business and having that flexibility and doing it with my forever person.
All right. I don't know how many people talk to their baby in the tummy and when they want to find out what is the next business they're going to start. I think that's pretty amazing. But more seriously, folks, how many of us have heard, why don't you just go get a real job? Go get a corporate job, do something that'll pay the bills. Why are you messing around with this entrepreneurial venture? So many of us have heard it, but they don't understand the key drive and the opportunity that we see and the desire to really fulfill how we've been created and our purpose oftentimes is to go out and solve those hard problems that others are not solving. But I have to chuckle because you hear that a lot. And that's really why you got to surround yourself with trusted support, with people who can help understand you, who know who you are, and say, hey, I think you can make this step out. If there's an opportunity for us to help, I want to encourage you to reach out to us at Milwaukee Business Coach, mkebusinesscoach.com, and see if there's ways that we can help you reach that next step in fulfilling your dream. Well, Angela mentioned that she started doing a part-time blog. Let's talk about how she transitioned from a part-time blog to a full-time gig.
So we'll tell the story of all the way back when my husband and I were getting married. We were Googling around for wedding venues in Milwaukee or wedding vendors in Milwaukee. And at the time, there was no local resource to help us with that, other than maybe magazines. But I mean, really, it was kind of when it was in 2004, 2005, 2006 is when we would have been planning our wedding. And because that local resource didn't exist, we were relying on the national website, the one in particular called The Knot. And so when you research on that website, you find yourself searching for venues in Milwaukee, but then all of a sudden you're looking at a venue in Green Bay, you're looking at a venue in Madison, and it didn't fill our needs. And so we really started to think, well, why isn't there something like that out there? So fast forward to 2008, we actually did launch Married in Milwaukee 1.0, we call it. We launched it as a social networking platform, and that was right when Facebook was coming out and getting a lot of traction and things like that. And Greg and I were both working full time, so we didn't put a lot of time and effort into it. Um, and long story short, we kind of sat on that for a while, didn't do too much with it. And then fast forward to 2012, which was a little bit after the time I had passed the CPA exam. And if you know anything about that exam, you study for it for forever. So I had a plan of I studied 20 hours a week for a whole year so that I could make sure to pass that exam on the first try. I didn't want to have to go back and take it again. So when I did pass it on that first try, I then had 20 hours a week that I was like, well, I don't really want to just replace the sitting and, on the couch watching TV. So then I had asked my husband, Greg, to redo Married in Milwaukee into 2.0 in more of a blog format. And so I started blogging more as a hobby of just something to do and then carved those nights out of my week of when I would work on it. But the best part it was is it really gave me this amazing platform to just reach out to locally owned businesses and talk to them and have a reason for them to want to come and talk to me. I could reach out and say, "Hey, I love your photography business. Can we meet for lunch? And maybe I feature you on the site." And so kind of giving them a benefit for connecting with me. So I that really is what started it all. And then over the span of the next 2 years, while I was still working my corporate job, towards the end of that, we were featured in the news 4 times in the month of January to talk about weddings. So right after that is kind of when we started to make some big decisions of, well, if I don't leave my corporate job, we can't take the business to that next level. I can't meet with people. I just don't have the capacity or time to do it. And so, and I kind of acted as more the salesperson. And so it started to be like, well, I think it's time to really quit. So it was really great being able to go into my boss's office and tell her, give my notice right after we were on the news. It all made a lot of sense. The pieces all fell into place. And then I left my corporate job. Wasn't making the money we needed to at that point, but knew that the potential was there.
This is an all too common story that we hear a lot. I wanted to go do something. I encountered a problem. In this case, she wanted to find some information out about weddings and just found there really weren't any good local resources and ways to be able to find the information short of larger national chains and the occasional go to the local show. And so she continued to be able to build that out. There was a problem, there was a need. She had the ability to solve that, and it continued to build and grow. And then she ended up getting some awesome press and some opportunity. A couple things stand out to me that are really pretty cool. When we pursue opportunities that are there and we start validating that there's actually an opportunity to generate some revenue, have the courage to take the step into it. The other part that she said that really stood out to me was, and it is helpful when these things happen. Hey, I was able to go into my boss and give notice on the heels of getting all this publicity and coverage. And I think that's super cool because that is a great reason to go. But I want to challenge a few people who are ready to go sooner. Stop looking for an excuse to leave your corporate job. You don't have to have a corporate job. You can be doing whatever. But if you're really called to this and you see the opportunity, sometimes we have other things holding us back, and these free us and allow us to go forward. But I want to encourage people who are listening, if you're in that space, are you actually ready to go now? That's something that we encourage. We run into a lot of business owners that we run it part-time for a while. They finally found an opportunity to move forward. And when at Milwaukee Business Coach, we evaluate what they're doing, man, sometimes it seems like there was an opportunity to go sooner or there was an opportunity to really prepare thoroughly so that when the launch happens, there was a lot more groundwork ready while they were part-time. So definitely take a look at that as an opportunity because I think that's something there that we can always learn from. So Angela goes on to tell about her initial attempts to raise funding in order to support her family. This is a situation that many of us have been in. That transition point, going from part-time to full-time, we haven't revved everything up yet, and we need to replace the income that was there. That income's gone because we decided we're going all in. Brent said, take a look, and I'm diving in. So here we go. And unfortunately, it can be a real difficult stretch. So I want you to listen to her transition and some of the path that she walked down.
We had our son at that point. Leaving your corporate gig when you need health insurance for yourself and your family, that was difficult. I also like to tell this story because I think most entrepreneurs have stories of resilience or of disappointment in their history. And so maybe about a year and a half of doing Married in Milwaukee, we saw that potential, knew I couldn't be working in corporate at the same time while trying to build the business. So we actually presented in front of a group to obtain some capital, to obtain some funding to kind of bridge us in that period of time so I could leave corporate and then work hard at the bit to grow the business. Did our presentation, got a ton of great feedback, and lots of people were really excited to quote unquote invest in us. Long story short, we did not get that funding. And I remember being devastated. And I remember just being really upset and crying and just trying to process all that. But then fast forward 6 months after that, I was able to leave my corporate job without us having any debt. So our company has never had any debt to do what we've done. It's all been very sweat equity intense. I'd also say a benefit of our business is there's not a lot of costs involved, like actual money costs. It's more like learning how to do things and the sweat equity, the time that you have to put into it versus the cash. Those two things of not having any debt and being able to do a business that you don't have to put a lot of cash into is huge. So that helped us a lot. And then as far as health insurance, while I don't really think it's Affordable Care Act, I don't think the healthcare is all that affordable. We were grateful that that existed. That we at least had that option of stability that we knew health insurance would be there for us.
Here's what stands out to me as I listen to Angela's story there. She is really, really excited that she was able to get to the point that she's at without a lot of debt. I think, unfortunately, too many entrepreneurs too early in the cycle say, I need to go get a bank loan in order to pay for this. Sometimes there's a good opportunity. There's a reason why, particularly if they have a fast repayment cycle. Maybe we got to get some inventory, some equipment, etc. However, even though it was a struggle, and she said it was a hard 6 months she had to go through, the benefit on the backside of not having that debt, not having that millstone on us. Sometimes, here's the honest truth. You ready? Money makes us stupid. We don't necessarily have to make the most efficient decisions when I can just draw on the line of credit some more. And I've seen far too many businesses, they tend to show up when they've spent about 95% of their line of credit. And then they're like, I better get a business coach and figure this out because that line of credit keeps going up and it doesn't go down. And while there are lots of places that we can help and start to turn around the business, flexibility has really decreased as a result. So if you can figure out how to build it, stick with your own sweat equity, design your budget for what you actually have in mind today, what you actually have available to you in resources, scale down to handle the revenue that you have coming in, that can actually be a really successful path forward. I also want to say that Angela was able to utilize things like the ACA to be able to bring on benefits. That can be number one thing that keeps people chained to their W-2 job. Oh, but I'm getting benefits from here. Well, let me tell you, that's not the only place that you can get benefits. There are opportunities. And it can be a little bit of a sticker shock too when you discover that your company has been subsidizing as much as they have. But there are some opportunities, particularly if you show a temporary drop in income, that you can actually get an advantage to be able to launch out. So don't be afraid. Go out and find some information, find a good support. Again, someone who's knowledgeable in that category to help you out. Do not let these be impediments to you getting your business going or to being able to grow your business to the next step. All right. So I go on to ask Angela, anyone know one of my favorite topics? You got it. Customer discovery. How is she going to prove out what the need actually is? It's one thing to write a blog and have people go, whoa, cool. Thank you for writing that information. It's another thing to actually start figuring out how to monetize that. So she goes out and finds out about her product and service before it gets all designed. Let's hear what Angela has to say.
At that time, too, the Knot was really a front runner, the national wedding website. And so I definitely think that helped to validate two things. The fact that people were online, young couples were online looking and researching their wedding and trying to find local vendors, number one. But then number two, it also validated that there was a market for vendors who wanted to advertise their services online. So a lot of the things that we did for when we validated that there was a need, I think networking with businesses too helped. Like I got to meet these folks that would talk about they were having trouble reaching out to the local audience. That part helped us a lot, just being able to see those both sides, the fact that there was a market for it, but then there was actually a way to make money. And there was a need really on both ends. The audience wanted information, but then the vendors wanted a way to connect with the audience.
All right, here's a piece I want everyone to hear. Frequently, I've heard businesses say, hey, if I end up having to compete against a national brand, that's this person's going to put me out of business. Whether it's big box merchant delivery service or whatever it might be. Here's the honest fact. Most of our businesses, frankly, are too small for anyone to really take a look at. Most of our businesses are finding a niche that others haven't really figured out how to overcome. In this case, it's the hyper-local nature of what Angela is actually doing. Married in Milwaukee, you can go to the large brand that's covering the whole country and we'll provide some great services. But to get the hyper-local nature, if I'm in Milwaukee and I'm getting married in Milwaukee, number one, that's probably going to show up in one of my search terms on a search engine. But number two, someone who's really being able to stay in contact and be able to nurture perhaps some of the smaller niceties that you're not going to find in the large scale service. And to know that there's some personal focus on that and to be able to emphasize that with some of the work they're going to do. So don't back away from your idea just because, oh, what if XYZ company swoops in and decides to start doing that tomorrow? Frankly, that's not typically how they work. Frankly, they typically tend to acquire rather than build from scratch because they would like someone else to do proof of concept. So if that happens for you, congratulations, you're about to get a great payday. But do not let that be a reason to stop you from launching your business. So as every business grows, we're going to have to encounter some tough strategic decisions. I went on to ask Angela about some of those that she had to make. Let's hear her story.
When you're in the online realm, things can move pretty quickly. So sometimes you have to make some decisions to, I'll use the example of social medias as they come out. Which ones do you have time for? Which ones is where your audience is? Which ones are going to get you the most exposure? So when we started, Instagram didn't exist. But then once we got further down the path, now Instagram has really become one of the main social media platforms, especially for the visual and beauty that exists in weddings. So that was something definitely having to adapt to what social medias are out there, but not going too crazy and just jumping in everything that comes your way. So it's a balance and making sure that you have time to be consistent with social media. The other piece too is maybe about 2 years after we were into our business, we would host these events called bridal networking nights. And if we were to do those again today, we would rebrand them as wedding networking nights, which is a whole nother, I can touch on that topic of like the inclusivity is something that's really changed over the span of our business. But we used to do these events and they got really successful. We did about 8 of them and they would draw 300 people from couples, engaged couples and vendors, and they would come and network in a space and do business that way. Ended up being really successful. We made money off of them, enough money that we knew it was a good idea. The revenue model was all there, but then they just started to almost get out of control as far as like what people wanted to do with them. Vendors were like, oh, well, you should do this and you should do that. And let's make it a photo shoot and let's do this. And we started to not like doing that. So it really, and that's another example of like, well, as an entrepreneur, I'm turning down this even though I know it makes me money, but I really, really don't like doing it. And so I think that that's another thing where we've kind of morphed, where we've refocused our online presence versus trying to worry so much about events that bring couples together and vendors together, even though that idea was amazing. Now we just more focus on doing a lot of vendor networking events. But so those are some examples of, you as an entrepreneur, you get to make those sometimes difficult decisions, but we got to say, hey, we don't want to do these events anymore, so we're not going to. And that's very freeing.
Folks, this part is really, really super important. So listen up. When we're in business for ourselves, we get the option to choose. We have the power of choice. It's one of the things we probably went into small business for. One of the choices we can make is, do we want to fire some clients? Do we want to drop some particular product lines? Are there things that we don't enjoy doing that we don't want to be into? Sometimes we outsource those, but sometimes we'll just eliminate them and be like, I used to do that, but now I'm not doing that anymore. Or I used to serve this segment of business. It's now not the type of business I want to serve. Maybe it's because of my expertise. Maybe it's because of my price point. Maybe it's because of how I've grown my staff and my capabilities and the type of jobs I want to take in. Kind of really doesn't matter how it comes about, but we do have the opportunity to choose. We launched into this because we saw an opportunity and a problem that needed to be solved. We don't have to chase every opportunity or problem that's out there, but that's one of the things that happen. Can does not equal should. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should get into it. So I want you to really think about that. We encounter that a lot with businesses at Milwaukee Business Coach, when businesses have sort of grown and evolved and it just seemed to follow the natural path. Maybe we scaled with bodies and we brought people in. And now what? And now they're a little bit stagnant. They're a little bit struggling. They're not getting the joy out of the business they want to have. It's a place where it's really, really important to get some trusted support, get some coaching, and dive in there and understand what is the right next path forward. And maybe it's a strategic redo, and some people may rebrand out of that, and that's fine too. But to move forward in a direction that's intentional because we're choosing the path we want to go. One of the things that I think is really essential is we have to stay sharp in our business. Things are changing all the time. Angela even referenced some changes that were going on in her business at the time. And as it grows and as it goes on, one of the issues that can come up is that we start to get complacent. We always do things the way we always did because it was successful for us back then. That's good to a point, but we have to stay sharp and to know what's next. Let's listen to how Angela stays on top of it.
It's probably one of the favorite parts about what I do is getting to meet all these small business owners. So that's how I stay in tune with the wedding industry. I do attend some professional networking type events, and there's some organizations that exist relative to that. But to be honest, I think we've really become almost the leaders in the industry. As far as like the publication aspect and being an online publication, that can be challenging. to stay on top of. Because again, there's shiny object syndrome. You can read hundreds of articles telling you things you should do different, social medias you should start up, should you be on TikTok, and all those kinds of things. So we read those with a little bit with a grain of salt, and try to be like, well, again, back to that point of you could really spend your time doing all of the things, but there's just not enough time to do all those. So we try to narrow in and say, well, what's really going to help our audience? What's going to help the vendors that advertise with us? And then what's going to, help us make more money and not spend too much time.
These questions are absolutely golden. What is going to help my audience? What will help the vendors that I'm serving? Where can I focus on making money without burning up all my time? Yes, we can do all the things. We get squirrel, shiny object. Let's go get it. We can do that all the time. But if we're asking ourselves some key questions and really analyzing what's the best path for us forward, a lot of times that is the path to success. And I want to encourage everyone, ask yourself those questions. What is it that my customers actually want and need? And what is it that I enjoy providing? If we're able to meet those two items, I think we're able to marry that together, pun intended, and be able to reach a different level of success and a different level of happiness and joy when we're doing and fulfilling our purpose. Well, I asked Angela more tell me about your support network. All of us need support. We need friends. We need the family around. We need other business owners. We need other people pouring into us. We need people pouring into us spiritually. There's a lot of ways to get support. But let's hear of some of her transition, because this is a story I think many of us are going to relate to, particularly if we've done larger corporate roles.
I feel like the majority of my friend group has completely changed from before we started Married at Milwaukee to now. And not that I'm not friends with those folks anymore. I think it's just when you're starting your own business and most of your friends worked in corporate, or most of your friends don't understand the commitments that are required of starting your own business. That took a while for me to get over those lost friendships, and constantly trying to keep them going and realizing that it's not good for either one of us to try and maintain this kind of fake relationship, I guess. So I think that's a key of knowing that going into it, you are going to lose friends and connections, and that's okay. But I would say now my network, I've been trying to be intentional with making my network be diverse and of all different types of people. And because of what we do, I've been able to do that, meaning that I can basically, I don't want to say it sound haughty either. I can reach out to anybody in Milwaukee in essence and find a reason they might want to meet with me. But I think that's the key too. When you reach out to people, find a reason they want to connect back with you, not thinking yourself hey, I want to bend your ear and talk to you about I want to get your advice. You want to say, hey, I saw blah, blah, blah that you did. I feel like I could make a great connection here. Can we chat about that? So that has been my network, and our network is huge in Milwaukee. But from a close perspective, really the close people in my life is my husband. I have a couple of close, good friends, but that's kind of how my network works. But that's the trade-off. So I have a close husband and we have a great relationship. And I know a ton of people in Milwaukee. I don't want to say on a surface level, but more in just an acquaintance / friend level, but not somebody I'm going to call up and be like, hey, you want to go to the movie? So that's an interesting trade-off, and one that I'm okay with now, but it took me a while to get here.
This is so true. Our friendships and relationships change over time. Many of us have left a situation. Sometimes when you leave school, when you leave a job, all these people that you had called friends, and it's not that they're bailing out on you, but the situation that bound you together tended to be geographic proximity. It tended to be the things that you do together. Maybe you were on a sports team together. A few of those relationships do last, but some turn out to be more acquaintances. And we've got to figure out how to get over that, rebuild and regrow. And it's one of the challenging spots, honestly, again, as small business owners. Where do we go to connect with other people who understand, who can support us, who have been through it before, who've done more in different ways than a W-2 job? Not saying a W-2 job is bad at all. What I'm saying is that we as small business owners are in a different environment and need a friend group that really can understand us and support us. So do reach out. They exist. They take a little bit of work, and honestly, they take us stepping out. And the first thing we have to do is get over whatever happened to those people I used to hang out with? Well, you're still welcome to call them, but your connection point may have changed. And that relationship may move differently. Do not burn bridges. You never know when someone is going to come forward and like, hey, 20 years ago, I remember you did X, Y, and Z. I'm going to make an introduction. I'm going to ask you for help. Now I'm doing something and I'd love to connect with you because of the impression you made on me 20 years ago. So never go burning bridges. Continue to foster old relationships, build the network, maintain that network, but build a new one that's going to stay fresh and present and relevant for you where you're at today. Well, I talked to Angela now about perseverance. When you've been in business for any period of time, you've come up with situations where you have to persevere. Let's hear her answer to that question.
Oddly enough, having a child helped to set boundaries where it was like, okay, well, we're shutting down at 5 o'clock, meaning I'm not checking my phone. I'm not checking my email. I'm not working on anything until I'm back at work the next morning. So help to persevere beyond kind of that letting your business take over your life. Because I'm sure you know that you could work for forever. Meaning there's always something to do. There's always something on your to-do list that you need to get done, and it's always going to be there for you tomorrow. And so I think being able to separate that has helped us with our business. I'd also say my husband is huge into work-life balance. So he has really saved us from doing a lot of those shiny objects syndrome type activities. Keeping those boundaries of work-life balance is huge. And I don't like the hustle culture. I don't like the people that will talk about how much they work or how many hours we're spending on the business the night before. I really don't even care to hear about that. I'd say in business, sometimes you encounter those moments where you have to work extra hard, but you need to make sure there's always a light at the end of the tunnel so that you can work really hard, but then be done with that hard work. And then you can kind of go back to a more normal, acceptable state so you don't burn yourself out.
Work will be there tomorrow, people. Leave it there. Set boundaries. Decide to put your phone down. I've seriously worked with people where we were just working to get one day or half a day in where they could focus and make sure they were available for their kids and being able to pick them up on time. Now, there are seasons, as Angela said, that when you have to work, you've got to work and there's things that have to get done, but have that be the exception rather than the norm. That was a key to her perseverance. Basically, don't get burned out was her summary. Don't get burned out. And I don't want that to happen to you either. If you're struggling with some of these things, we work with clients on that on a regular basis because we tend to be doing all the things. We're the main show. Make sure that you figure out how to put that in. It can be done. The work will be there tomorrow, and there will be clients who are ready to buy from you tomorrow. Well, like you, I can't do this on my own. I want to thank Chris Crane for doing all the music for both our intro and our outro. And I want to thank my amazing wife, Kate, for doing the editing necessary in order to make this episode available to you on whatever platform you're listening to. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, I want to encourage you to please subscribe, like, share, and comment. So again, thank you for joining me on this episode of Entrepreneur Encounters. I'm Brent Halfwasson, Milwaukee Small Business Coach, and I want to invite Chris to take us out. Ready to take